freedom. We celebrate it, we long for it, and we often take it for granted. But there is something we must understand. Freedom is not a gift to be handled lightly. It is not simply an escape from chains or walls. It is a responsibility. Now we may wonder, how can something as beautiful and sought after as freedom be a burden? We often think of freedom as the ultimate prize, the escape from the shackles of control and oppression. Yet, it is within the very nature of freedom that a responsibility emerges. Freedom does not exist in a vacuum. It is not absolute. It requires discipline, understanding, and the wisdom to use it well. Imagine a person who has spent their entire life in captivity, whether physical, mental, or social. When that individual is released, they are initially overjoyed, thrilled by the idea of living without constraints. But over time, they begin to encounter the consequences of this newfound freedom. They must decide where to go, what to do, and how to live. No longer can they simply follow instructions or rely on someone else to make decisions for them. The weight of this responsibility presses down on them, and for the first time, they may feel a sense of overwhelming burden. Freedom forces us to choose, and with every choice comes a consequence. This burden of freedom becomes even more apparent in the context of our society. We live in a world that claims to cherish freedom, but how many of us truly understand what it means to live freely? True freedom is not about doing whatever we want, whenever we want. That is chaos masquerading as liberty. True freedom is the power to act responsibly, to choose wisely, to be disciplined in our pursuit of happiness, growth, and contribution to the world around us. In fact, true freedom is not freedom from rules, but freedom within them. Rules do not bind us, they guide us. They shape our choices, protect us from harm, and allow us to navigate a complex world with purpose. Freedom without boundaries is anarchy. The burden of freedom is understanding that while we are free, we must also be accountable. Every action, every word, every decision has a ripple effect, not just on us, but on those around us. Freedom means we cannot simply think of ourselves. We must consider the impact of our choices on the greater good. As we seek freedom, we must ask ourselves, what kind of freedom are we pursuing? Is it the freedom to be selfish and reckless? Or is it the freedom to serve others, to rise above our impulses, to live with integrity? True freedom is not the absence of limitations. It is the ability to rise above those limitations and still act in accordance with our highest values. And there lies the challenge. The burden of freedom is the realization that we are the architects of our own lives. It is the realization that our destiny is not determined by external forces, but by the choices we make every day. We are free to create the future we desire, but we must also live with the consequences of those choices. It is this truth that we must come to terms with. The more freedom we gain, the more responsibility we assume. And this is where many falter. We want the fruits of freedom without wanting to bear its weight. But the two are inseparable. Freedom is a partnership between power and responsibility. The more power we gain, the more responsibility we carry. The more we have the ability to choose, the more we must consider the far-reaching effects of those choices. The burden of freedom then is not a punishment. It is a call to maturity, a challenge to grow into the person we were always meant to be. To be truly free is to understand that our freedom is not just about us. It is about the world we create with our choices. It is about the impact we have on others, on our communities, on the generations that will follow. Freedom is not simply a right, it is a privilege that requires wisdom, discernment, and a deep commitment to doing what is right. The burden of freedom, when understood, is the gift of shaping a world that reflects the highest ideals of justice, love, and service. So I ask you, what will you do with your freedom? Will you use it to build, to uplift, to transform? Or will you let it slip through your fingers, wasted and unfulfilled? The choice is yours. But remember, with freedom comes responsibility. And with responsibility comes the power to change not only your life, but the lives of everyone around you. The burden of freedom is the greatest gift we can ever receive. The gift of choice, the gift of impact, the gift of responsibility. Embrace it, live it, and in doing so, you will find the true meaning of freedom. Freedom is a responsibility. True freedom is not simply the absence of restrictions, but the ability to make informed, responsible choices. With freedom comes the weight of accountability for our actions. Freedom requires discipline. It is not about doing whatever we want, but about acting within boundaries that guide us toward positive outcomes. Freedom without discipline leads to chaos. Choices have consequences. Every decision we make, big or small, affects not just ourselves, but those around us. True freedom requires us to consider the impact of our choices on the greater good. Freedom is not a lack of limitations. True freedom lies within boundaries. Rules and guidelines do not bind us, but shape and protect us, enabling us to live with purpose and direction. Freedom is about serving others. Real freedom is not about being selfish or reckless, but about using our freedom to uplift and serve those around us. Is the freedom to live with integrity and contribute to the world. The burden of freedom is a call to maturity. The more freedom we have, the greater the responsibility we carry. True freedom challenges us to grow, make wise choices, and shape the world for the better. Freedom is often viewed as the ultimate prize. Something we strive for, something we celebrate, and something that symbolizes liberation from oppression and limitation. But the deeper truth is that freedom is not just a gift, it is a responsibility, one that we must take seriously, because with it comes the weight of accountability. We are taught to believe that freedom means to do whatever we desire, to act without restriction, to live without constraints. While there is an element of truth to this, it is a narrow and incomplete view of what freedom truly entails. True freedom is not about doing whatever we want, whenever we want. This is a misconception that often leads to chaos. It is not the absence of rules, but the ability to make choices within a framework of responsibility. Freedom is the power to act, to think, to choose, but it is also the capacity to bear the consequences of those actions, thoughts, and choices. The key to understanding freedom lies in realizing that freedom and responsibility are two sides of the same coin. You cannot have one without the other. When we are given the freedom to make decisions, we are also given the responsibility to manage those decisions. The challenge is not simply to have the ability to choose, but to choose wisely. The burden of freedom lies in the fact that once we are free, we must deal with the outcomes of our choices. We can no longer blame external forces, authorities, or limitations for our situation. Our lives, in essence, are shaped by the decisions we make, and we are fully responsible for those decisions. This responsibility requires us to be aware of the impact our actions have, not just on our own lives, but on the lives of others as well. Freedom without responsibility can lead to selfishness, greed, and harm. Because if we are not mindful of the consequences of our choices, we may unknowingly cause suffering to others. In contrast, true freedom involves using our power to choose in ways that benefit both ourselves and the greater good. It involves the wisdom to recognize that our choices are interdependent with the well-being of those around us. For instance, consider the freedom to speak. While we are free to express our opinions and thoughts, there is a responsibility that comes with this freedom. Words have power. They can build, but they can also break. The freedom to speak requires the responsibility to speak truthfully, kindly, and with respect. Just because we can say anything doesn't mean we should say everything. The burden of freedom in this case is the awareness that our words can have lasting consequences, and we must be mindful of how we use this power. Similarly, think about the freedom to act. In a society that values individual liberty, each of us has the freedom to pursue our own goals, to carve our own path, and to shape our own future. But with that comes the responsibility to ensure that our actions are aligned with our values and that they do not harm others. It means we must take into account the broader implications of our decisions, whether it's in our relationships, our work, or our communities. Freedom then isn't about being free from the need to consider others, but about being empowered to make choices that reflect our highest ideals and contribute positively to the world. Ultimately, the burden of freedom is a call to maturity. It forces us to acknowledge that with power comes responsibility. As we gain more freedom, we must also grow in our ability to manage that freedom wisely. It challenges us to become the kind of people who can handle the weight of freedom without being overwhelmed by it. True freedom, in its deepest sense, is the ability to make choices that reflect our integrity, our wisdom, and our commitment to a greater good. It is the recognition that freedom is not just a privilege, it is a responsibility that requires our full participation, awareness, and accountability. The real burden of freedom is not in the absence of constraints, but in the awareness that we are the architects of our own lives, and we must live in a way that respects both our power and the well-being of others. Freedom is often misunderstood as the absence of all limitations or restrictions. Yet true freedom is more nuanced than simply being unbound. The misconception that freedom is purely the ability to do anything at any moment is dangerous, as it can lead to chaos and disorder. True freedom is not about having unlimited options or acting impulsively. It is about exercising discipline and control over our choices. This is where the concept of responsibility becomes central to the idea of freedom. Freedom without discipline is nothing more than reckless behavior. And it is through discipline that we are able to direct our actions and ensure that we are making choices that align with our values and goals. Discipline is not about limitation. It is about empowerment. When we impose discipline on ourselves, we are not restricting our potential, but rather channeling our energy and decisions in a way that leads to positive outcomes. Discipline enables us to remain focused on our objectives and prevents us from succumbing to distractions or making impulsive decisions that could lead to regret or harm. It is through discipline that we learn to manage the power that freedom gives us. Freedom without discipline is like a powerful river left untamed. It may have immense potential, but without boundaries or guidance, it can cause destruction. With discipline, however, the river can be harnessed, directed, and used to create life and sustain communities. Consider the freedom we have in our daily lives. We are free to spend our time as we choose, to decide what we want to pursue, and to direct our own actions. But this freedom is only meaningful when we exercise discipline in how we use our time and energy. Without discipline, we might waste our time on trivial activities, neglect our responsibilities, or make decisions that ultimately lead us astray. Discipline, then, is not a contradiction to freedom. It is the framework that makes true freedom possible. It enables us to choose wisely, to act in ways that align with our higher goals, and to create outcomes that we can be proud of. One of the key aspects of discipline in the context of freedom is the ability to delay gratification in a world that often prioritizes instant rewards. Discipline teaches us to resist the temptation for immediate pleasure in favor of long-term fulfillment. Whether it is in the pursuit of a career, the building of relationships, or the development of personal skills, discipline allows us to make choices that lead to lasting success, even if those choices require sacrifices in the short term. This ability to delay gratification is one of the hallmarks of mature freedom. It is not about giving in to every whim, but about making choices that are in alignment with a larger vision for our lives. Discipline also helps us navigate the complexities of decision making. Freedom by nature opens up multiple possibilities, and with each possibility comes a decision. It is in these moments of decision that discipline becomes essential. We can easily be overwhelmed by the multitude of choices available to us, but it is discipline that provides the clarity and focus to make decisions that serve us in the long run. Whether it's deciding how to spend our money, how to manage our health, or how to prioritize our relationships, discipline helps us avoid the distractions of momentary desire and guides us toward choices that reflect our deeper values and long-term goals. Ultimately, discipline is what allows freedom to flourish. It is the foundation upon which we build a life that is not only free, but also purposeful and fulfilling. Without discipline, freedom becomes like a car without a steering wheel. It may be moving, but it lacks direction and purpose. With discipline, we can direct our lives in meaningful ways, make choices that support our growth, and use our freedom to create positive change, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us. In this way, discipline transforms freedom from a potential burden into a powerful tool for growth and achievement. Every choice we make, whether big or small, carries consequences. Freedom, by its very nature, involves the power to choose. It gives us the autonomy to determine the course of our lives. However, with this power comes the inescapable truth that every decision we make will lead to a result, an outcome, or a consequence. This is the burden of freedom. It's not simply that we can choose, but that we must face the results of those choices. The freedom to act comes hand in hand with the responsibility to accept and navigate the impact of our indecisions. When we make a choice, we are not just affecting ourselves in isolation. Our decisions ripple outward, touching the lives of those around us. Whether it's in our personal relationships, our professional lives, or the broader community, the choices we make shape not only our own future, but also the futures of others. This is where many individuals fail to fully grasp the weight of freedom. They view their freedom as something individualistic, something that only impacts their own lives. Yet true freedom is always interwoven with the lives of others, and the consequences of our actions often extend far beyond what we might anticipate or intend. Take, for example, the freedom to speak. While we are free to express our thoughts, opinions, and ideas, our words can have a profound effect on those around us. A harsh comment or a careless remark can hurt others, damage relationships, and create lasting emotional scars. On the other hand, kind and thoughtful words can uplift, encourage, and strengthen bonds. The choice to speak is powerful, but it carries the responsibility of considering the effect our words will have on others. The consequences of speech are not always immediately visible, but they can shape the course of relationships, communities, and even societies. Similarly, the freedom to act, to make decisions about our time, resources, and behavior also carries consequences that stretch far beyond our own lives. If we choose to act in ways that are reckless or self-centered, we might experience immediate gratification, but over time, the consequences of those actions could lead to regret, broken relationships, and missed opportunities. On the flip side, if we choose to act with integrity, responsibility, and consideration for others, we can create positive outcomes that contribute to our personal growth and the well-being of those around us. One of the challenges of freedom is that the consequences of our choices are not always immediately clear. The impact of our actions often unfolds over time. Sometimes the true result of a decision may not be evident for years, making it difficult to predict how our choices will play out. For example, the decision to invest time in learning a new skill or to prioritize our health might not show immediate results, but over time, the rewards of those decisions become clear. Conversely, neglecting our responsibilities or making impulsive short-term decisions may not seem harmful at first, but the long-term consequences can be detrimental. The consequences can be detrimental. But hey, this highlights the need for wisdom and foresight when exercising our freedom. While we may have the right to make choices, we must also consider the broader implications of those choices. Freedom without foresight is dangerous, for it leads to decisions made in haste or based on short-term desires, without regard for the long-term consequences. Wisdom allows us to look beyond the immediate and recognize the potential outcomes of our decisions, helping us make choices that align with our deeper values and long-term goals. The burden of freedom then is the weight of responsibility to carefully consider the consequences of our actions. Every decision, no matter how trivial it may seem in the moment, has the potential to create lasting change. As we exercise our freedom, we must be aware that we are not only shaping our own future, but also impacting the world around us. The choices we make can either contribute to the flourishing of those around us or hinder it. The freedom to choose is one of our greatest gifts, but it is also one of our greatest responsibilities. The consequences of our choices are a reflection of the way we exercise that freedom. And it is through careful, deliberate decisions that we can create a future that reflects our highest values and ideals. True freedom is not the absence of limitations, but the ability to thrive within them. This is an essential understanding we must embrace in order to fully appreciate the depth and power of freedom. Many people view freedom as the ability to act without restrictions, as if boundaries are inherently limiting or oppressive. However, the reality is that true freedom is found not in a lack of rules or structure, but in the ability to function effectively and meaningfully within the framework provided by those rules. It is through boundaries that we gain the direction, clarity, and focus necessary to live purposeful lives. Consider the natural world. An animal confined within a specific habitat will thrive only if it can function within the boundaries of that environment. A fish cannot survive outside the water, nor can a bird survive without the freedom to fly within the boundaries of the sky. In the same way, humans require structure to guide their actions, decisions, and relationships. If we were to live without any boundaries, we would not truly be free. We would simply be lost, confused, and direct. It is the boundaries that give us a sense of purpose, allowing us to focus our energy and efforts toward meaningful and productive ends. In society, the boundaries imposed by laws, social norms, and ethical standards are often viewed with resistance. We may feel that these limitations restrict our freedom, but the truth is they help us to navigate the complexities of life with greater ease. Laws, for instance, are not designed to stifle our freedom. Rather, they create a structure that ensures fairness, justice, and respect for the rights of others. Without laws, society would descend into chaos, where individuals could act however they wished with no regard for the well-being of others. In this sense, laws protect our freedom by establishing boundaries that ensure we can all live in a world where our actions do not infringe upon the freedom of others. Similarly, social norms and ethical guidelines help to shape our behavior in ways that foster harmony and cooperation. These boundaries provide a framework for how we interact with others, encouraging respect, kindness, and empathy. They guide us in making decisions that are not only beneficial to us, but also to those around us. Without such guidelines, we would be left to navigate life based solely on personal desire, leading to confusion and harm. Boundaries are essential for establishing trust, building relationships, and creating a sense of security and stability in our communities. The burden of freedom is recognizing that these limitations are not our enemies, but our allies. We need structure to help us use our freedom wisely and responsibly. Just as a car requires lanes on a road to avoid collisions and move in the right direction, we too need boundaries to navigate our lives effectively. Without these boundaries, we risk veering off course and causing harm to ourselves and others. The challenge is not in breaking free from limitations, but in understanding how to operate within them to maximize our potential. In fact, boundaries give us the space to express our true freedom. They provide us with the foundation upon which we can build our lives, pursue our passions, and make meaningful contributions to the world. The freedom to choose, to act, and to create exists precisely because of the boundaries that guide us. They allow us to focus on what truly matters and give us the tools to align our actions with our values and goals. Without boundaries, freedom becomes meaningless. It is only when we have structure that we can truly exercise our freedom in ways that are purposeful and fulfilling. Boundaries do not bind us. They enable us to live authentically, to grow, and to make a positive impact on the world. The more we understand the role of boundaries in shaping our freedom, the more we can use them as tools for personal growth and societal well-being. True freedom is found not in the absence of limitations, but in the ability to navigate life with wisdom, purpose, and responsibility, using the boundaries in place to create a life of meaning and fulfillment. True freedom is not just about personal autonomy or the liberty to act without constraint. It is at its core the ability to serve others. This idea may seem counterintuitive at first, especially when we are taught to view freedom as individual empowerment, the right to do what we want, when we want, for our own benefit. However, when we examine the deeper essence of freedom, we find that its greatest expression comes not through self-centeredness, but through service. The more we use our freedom to lift others up, the more we elevate ourselves, and the more profound our freedom becomes. At its highest level, freedom is about the capacity to choose actions that benefit the collective good, to contribute positively to society, and to make a difference in the lives of others. This does not mean sacrificing our own well-being or purpose, but it does mean recognizing that our freedom is not truly free unless it is shared. We cannot fully understand or appreciate freedom if we are only focused on our personal desires, disconnected from the needs and experiences of those around us. The essence of freedom is found in our ability to transcend self-interest and contribute to the betterment of others. When we are free to serve others, we discover a kind of fulfillment that cannot be attained through self-serving behaviors. This is because the greatest rewards in life often come from the impact we have on others. Our relationships, our communities, and even our own sense of purpose are enriched when we choose to use our freedom for the benefit of others. When we act with empathy, compassion, and generosity, we not only help those in need, but we also create a deeper connection with the world around us. Serving others frees us from the isolation that comes with a self-centered existence and connects us to something greater than ourselves. In fact, one of the most powerful forms of freedom is the freedom to give, to share our time, resources, and talents with others. When we give freely without expecting anything in return, we tap into a deeper sense of fulfillment and purpose. It is in giving that we experience the true power of freedom. While our society often equates freedom with personal gain, the truest freedom is found in the ability to give and to make a positive difference. It is through selfless service that we find deeper meaning in our lives. And we also inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of goodwill and kindness. This shift from self-centered freedom to other-centered freedom is what truly empowers us. It is when we embrace the freedom to serve that we transcend the limitations of selfishness and embrace the broader purpose for which we were created. The more we give, the more we receive. Often not in material form, but in the sense of connection, fulfillment, and joy that comes from knowing we have contributed to the well-being of others. This is a deeper and more lasting form of freedom, one that transcends fleeting pleasures and leads to a more meaningful, impactful life. Furthermore, serving others doesn't mean neglecting our own needs or goals. It's important to understand that true freedom does not require us to abandon our own pursuits or desires. Rather, it encourages us to integrate our personal goals with the welfare of others. The most successful and impactful people in the world are those who have found ways to use their freedom and talents to serve others while also pursuing their own growth and success. They understand that personal fulfillment and collective benefit are not mutually exclusive, but are deeply interconnected. In this sense, freedom becomes a shared experience. As we serve, we enrich not only the lives of others, but also our own. We elevate the collective good while also growing as individuals. In embracing the freedom to serve, we embrace the highest expression of our humanity, recognizing that the most profound freedoms are those that are used to make the world a better place for all. It is through service that we unlock the true potential of our freedom, creating a world where everyone can thrive. The more we use our freedom to help others, the more we experience the joy, purpose, and fulfillment that come from living a life that reflects the deepest values of humanity. The burden of freedom is not simply about making choices or having the power to act. It is also a call to maturity. As we gain more freedom, we are challenged to grow in our ability to handle that freedom wisely. The more freedom we have, the more responsibility we must shoulder. This maturity involves the growth of self-awarenesses, self-discipline, and the ability to make decisions that not only benefit us, but also contribute positively to the world around us. The weight of freedom becomes more apparent as we become more capable of understanding its potential impact and the consequences of our choices. When we first experience freedom, we may view it as a means to escape restrictions or to act on our impulses. But as we mature, we begin to understand that freedom is not just about doing whatever we want. It's about making choices that are aligned with our values, goals, and the greater good. The more we mature, the more we realize that the true power of freedom lies in the wisdom to choose actions that reflect our highest ideals and aspirations. This shift from a selfish, short-term view of freedom to a more long-term, responsible approach is the mark of true maturity. The burden of freedom challenges us to reflect on the consequences of our decisions. It pushes us to ask difficult questions. What is the impact of my actions on others? How will this decision affect my future and the future of those around me? In our younger years, we may be less concerned with the long-term outcomes of our choices, driven more by immediate desires or feelings. However, as we mature, we begin to recognize that every choice, no matter how small, has consequences that extend beyond the immediate moment. This awareness is what enables us to act with greater purpose and responsibility. Maturity in freedom comes when we understand that our choices are not isolated events, but part of a larger pattern that shapes our lives and the lives of others. In this process of maturation, we also develop a greater sense of empathy and consideration for others. As we mature in freedom, we come to realize that true freedom is not only about our own well-being, but also about the well-being of those around us. Our decisions are interconnected with the lives of others, and the freedom to act should be exercised with respect and mindfulness. This sense of interconnectedness brings us to a deeper understanding of the power of our choices and the responsibility that comes with it. We no longer see ourselves as isolated individuals acting in a vacuum. Instead, we see ourselves as part of a larger community where our actions have an impact on the collective whole. Maturity in freedom also means the ability to delay gratification and make sacrifices for the greater good. The younger, more impulsive self may be driven by immediate desires or the pursuit of short-term pleasure. However, as we mature, we learn that real freedom often requires the ability to forego instant gratification in favor of long-term benefits. It's about making decisions that contribute to our long-term success, happiness, and fulfillment, even if they require us to sacrifice in the moment. This ability to delay gratification is one of the hallmarks of mature freedom, and it is essential for creating a life that is not only successful, but meaningful. Moreover, the burden of freedom calls us to continually grow and evolve. Freedom is not a static concept. It requires ongoing self-reflection, growth, and development. The more freedom we have, the greater the potential for both success and failure. It is through the lessons we learn from our mistakes and triumphs that we become more capable of handling the responsibility of freedom. Maturity in freedom is a lifelong journey, one that involves constant learning, adjusting, and refining our approach to life. In conclusion, the burden freedom is ultimately a call to maturity. A call to grow in our ability to navigate life with wisdom, responsibility, and integrity. As we mature, we begin to understand true freedom is not about unrestrained choice, but about the wise exercise of that choice. Maturity and freedom means using our power to make choices that align with our highest values, benefit others, and contribute to the creation of a better future for all. It is through this process of growth that we truly become the architects of our own lives and of a world where freedom is not just a privilege, but a responsibility. In conclusion, the burden of freedom is not something to fear or resent, but something to embrace with understanding and wisdom. Freedom in its truest form is a profound responsibility. It requires us to make thoughtful, deliberate choices and accept the consequences of those choices. It challenges us to grow in maturity, discipline, and awareness, teaching us that our freedom is not just about individual empowerment, but about serving others, upholding values, and contributing to the collective well-being of society. True freedom is not the absence of limitations, but the ability to navigate those limitations with grace and purpose. It calls us to embrace the boundaries that shape our lives, as they provide the structure within which we can fully express our potential. Through service, we find the highest expression of freedom, using our power to lift others up while also enriching our own lives. The burden of freedom lies in the responsibility we carry, not just for our own actions, but for the impact those actions have on the world around us. Ultimately, the greatest freedom comes from maturity. The ability to make choices that align with our higher goals. The ability to think beyond ourselves and consider the long-term consequences of our actions. As we mature, we gain the wisdom to use our freedom not for fleeting pleasures, but for lasting fulfillment and purpose. The burden of freedom, then, is not something that limits us. It is something that shapes us into the individuals we are meant to become: responsible, compassionate, and impactful. True freedom is not simply the power to act, but the wisdom to act with integrity, the maturity to navigate life's complexities, and the responsibility to make choices that contribute to the greater good. In this way, we can transform the burden of freedom into the most powerful tool for growth, service, and positive change in our lives and in the world.